The morning at Ashwick Hall began the way it always did, with the small sounds that Miss Vivienne Ashcombe had come to know better than her own heartbeat. There was the soft tick of the tall clock in the front hall. There was the creak of the third stair, which the housekeeper always stepped on by mistake. There was the low hiss of the fire being built up in the library grate, and the quiet thud of a book being set down on the reading table by the same hand at the same hour, every morning, for the past 7 months. Vivienne sat in her usual chair by the window in the small east parlour. The chair was old and its blue cushion had grown thin, but she liked the way it held her. She had a cup of tea in her hands. The tea was strong and a little bitter, the way she liked it, and it smelled of the dried orange peel the cook always slipped into the pot. Steam rose from the cup and warmed her chin. Outside the window, the gardens were still white with frost. The grass looked like the top of a cake, dusted and stiff. Her breath made a small cloud on the glass when she leaned forward, and she watched the cloud grow and fade, grow and fade. She had not planned to live at Ashwick Hall. She had come, 6 months and 3 weeks ago, as a companion to the Duke of Marchford's aunt, an old woman named Lady Osprey, who had a sharp mind and a soft heart, and a bad chest that kept her in bed most days. Vivienne read to her, wrote her letters, brushed her white hair every night, and heard, over and over, the stories of a house that had once been full of children and music and dogs. The house was not full now. It was quiet. It held its breath. The Duke of Marchford, whose name was Alastair Wren, kept to the west wing, and to his study, and to the library. Vivienne had learned his habits without meaning to. He rose before the sun. He took coffee, not tea. He read for an hour in the library between 8 and 9, always in the same chair, always with the same green blanket folded over the arm. He never used the blanket. It had belonged to someone once, she guessed, and he could not put it away and could not use it. He rode out at 10. He came back at 1. He did not take luncheon with the household. He worked until dark. He ate a small supper alone. He read until late. He never sat in the front rooms. He never opened the music room. He never went into the small orangery at the south end of the hall. She knew all this the way she knew the tick of the clock. She had not tried to know it. It had come to her the way rain comes to a roof. She set her cup down on the little table beside her chair. The saucer made a soft, clean sound against the wood. She smoothed her grey wool dress over her knees. She had 3 dresses. This was the warm one. She lifted her book from her lap, a small volume of poems that had belonged to her mother, and she opened it to a page she had read 40 times. She did not read it now. She only looked at the shape of the words. At 8:30, she heard him. He came down the west corridor. His footstep was not heavy, but it was even and slow, and she could tell it from any other footstep in the house. She had not decided to learn it. She had only heard it enough. He passed the parlour door without stopping. She did not lift her head. He would not look in. He never did. He went to the library. She heard the door open and close. She heard, a moment later, the soft thud of the book being set down on the reading table. The house settled again. Vivienne let out a breath she had not known she was holding. She smiled a little at herself, because she was a sensible woman, and it was silly to hold your breath for a footstep. She turned the page of her book. She read 1 line, slowly, and she meant it this time. The morning went on. The frost outside began to give a little where the sun touched it. A robin landed on the low stone wall near the yew hedge and hopped along, its small feet leaving tiny prints in the white. Vivienne watched it for a long moment. Then she rose, tidied her cup and saucer onto the tray, and went upstairs to see if Lady Osprey was awake. Lady Osprey was awake, and she was hungry, and she was in a good mood. She wanted her hair brushed, and she wanted to hear the letter from her cousin in Bath read again. Vivienne brushed and read and listened while the old woman fussed about her nephew. "He does not eat enough," said Lady Osprey. "He does not sleep. He rides that black horse in weather that would kill a lesser man, and he will not speak of it." "No, ma, Vivienne said. She had heard this many times. "He has never been the same," said Lady Osprey, "since the boy came." Vivienne stilled the brush for a moment. She did not press. She had learned that Lady Osprey would give what she meant to give when she meant to give it, and no sooner. "The boy," Lady Osprey said, and her voice went thin, "is my sister's son's son. My great-nephew. 10 years old. His mother is dead. His father is dead. He has nobody but Alastair, and Alastair does not know what to do with a child. He does not know what to do with himself. He tries. He is a good man. But he is a man who has lost too many people to trust that a child will stay." Vivienne started brushing again, gently. "The child is at Ashwick now?" "He has been here a fortnight." "You have not seen him?" "I have seen him twice at a distance," Vivienne said. "Once in the hall. Once at the stables. He did not speak." "He does not speak often," said Lady Osprey. "He is a quiet child. Too quiet. Alastair does not know how to make him less quiet, and I am too old to climb the stairs to the nursery, and so the boy sits by his window and looks out." Vivienne set down the brush. She looked at her hands. "What is his name, Ma'am?" "Theo," said Lady Osprey. "Theo Wren." Vivienne folded the letter from Bath and set it on the small table by the bed. "May I read to him sometimes?" Lady Osprey looked at her with sharp, wet eyes. "You may do whatever you please, my dear. You may do more good in this house than any of us." That afternoon, Vivienne went up to the nursery. The nursery was at the top of the east stair, in a wing of the house that faced the pond. It was a bright room with pale yellow paper on the walls and a rocking horse in the corner that had lost most of its paint. There was a fire in the grate. There was a small boy sitting on the window seat with his knees drawn up under his chin. He had dark hair that needed a trim. He had grey eyes. He did not look at Vivienne when she came in. She did not speak first. She sat down on a low chair near the fire, and she opened her book, and she began to read, softly, to no one in particular. She read for 10 minutes. The boy did not move. Then she closed the book, set it on the chair, and left the room without speaking. She came back the next day and did the same thing. On the third day, when she rose to go, the boy said, very quietly, "What was the name of the horse?" Vivienne stopped at the door. She turned. "In the poem." He nodded, still looking out the window. "The poem does not say," she told him. "I have always thought he should have a name. What do you think it ought to be?" The boy thought about it. His small face did not change. Finally he said, "Bramble." "Bramble is a very good name," Vivienne said, and she went out. The next morning, she brought her book of poems back to the nursery, and she wrote the name Bramble in the margin next to the horse, and she showed the boy, and he almost smiled. That was how it began, between her and the child. Slowly, the way frost gives to sun. She did not push. She did not perform. She only came and read and sat and left. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes he did not. She did not mind either way. She had not, in all this time, spoken. She had seen him from a distance more than once. She had passed him in the hall twice, and he had bowed slightly, and she had curtsied, and neither of them had spoken. She was a companion to his aunt. She was a woman in a grey dress in a house that was full of grey dresses in his mind, she supposed. She did not expect to be noticed, and she preferred it that way. She had come to Ashwick to work and to be quiet, and she had lost, some years ago, any wish to be looked at by any man for any reason. She had her reasons. She did not think of them often. She kept them folded, the way she kept her mother's book of poems, in a drawer at the back of her mind. It was on the 5th day of January that the thing happened. The morning had been very cold. The frost had not lifted at all. The gardener had come in for warm cider at 9 and had said the pond in the lower field was solid ice, thicker than he had seen it in years. Lady Osprey had asked for her second shawl. Vivienne had built up the fire in her ladyship's room and had gone downstairs to fetch a fresh pot of tea. She was crossing the front hall, tray in hand, when a housemaid came running down the stairs with her cap askew and her eyes wild. "Miss Ashcombe," the girl said, breathless. "Master Theo is not in the nursery. He is not in the nursery. He is not anywhere. Cook says he went out the side door an hour past. He had his coat, but not his good one. And he went toward the lower field, miss, toward the pond." Vivienne set the tray down on the hall table with a sharpness that made the cups ring. She did not think. She moved. She did not stop for her cloak. She did not stop for gloves. She went out through the side door in her grey wool dress, and the cold hit her like a hand. The frost bit her cheeks. Her breath came out in fast, thin clouds. The ground was hard as iron under her thin shoes, and her feet felt the cold at once, sharp and mean. She lifted her skirts, and she ran. She ran past the kitchen garden, past the yew hedge, past the low stone wall where the robin had been. She ran across the long white lawn, and the grass crunched under her, and the world was very still around her, except for her own breath. She saw the pond from the top of the low rise. It sat in the hollow of the field, grey-white and flat, ringed with dark reeds. From the top of the rise, she could see the small shape of a boy on the ice, near the middle, standing still, one hand out to his side as if for balance. And she could see, from up here, what he could not see from down there. A long, dark line in the ice, running from the far bank almost to his feet. "Theo," she said, and her voice was small, and then she said it louder. "Theo, do not move." The boy turned his head toward her voice. The ice cracked. It was not a loud sound. It was a low, small sound, like a piece of paper being torn behind a closed door. It was the worst sound Vivienne had ever heard. The boy dropped through the ice. She ran. She did not remember the running. She only remembered arriving at the edge of the pond, and the reeds catching at her skirts, and the cold water at the bank soaking through her shoes and into her stockings, and the flat, hard sheet of the ice, and the black hole in the middle of it where the child had been. She saw his hand come up. Just his small hand, gloved in brown wool, breaking the surface. Then his face, white and wet, and his mouth open, and a sound coming out of him that was not a scream but something worse, a small choked cry, the sound of a child who is too cold and too shocked to scream. Vivienne stepped onto the ice. It groaned under her. She heard it. She kept going. She went low on her hands and knees, spreading her weight, the way she had once seen a shepherd do on a frozen tarn in the north when she was a little girl. The ice was rough under her palms, and it burned her skin at once with cold. Her dress dragged. Her hair fell out of its pins and hung around her face. She crawled. "Theo," she said, and her voice was steady, and she was surprised by it. "Theo, look at me. Look at me." The boy looked at her. His eyes were huge. "I am coming," she said. "Do not thrash. Keep your arms out, Keep your arms on the ice. Do you hear me? He nodded. He was too cold to speak. She reached the edge of the hole. She was 3 feet from him. She could see, through the black water, the pale shape of him, kicking weakly. His coat was heavy with water, and it was pulling him down. His small gloved hands scrabbled at the edge of the ice, and the ice broke away under them, and he slid an inch lower into the water, and his chin went under. Vivienne did not scream. She did not think. She lay flat on the ice, and she reached her hand into the water, and she caught his wrist. His glove was slick, and it slipped in her fingers, and she caught him again, this time by his bare skin, and she held. The ice under her cracked. She pushed herself back an inch. The crack widened. It ran along beside her hip like a small, thin snake. She swore under her breath, a word she had not said aloud since she was 15. She held on to the child. "Theo," she said, "I am going to break this ice. I am going to break it toward the bank, all the way, so we do not have to crawl across the middle. Do you understand me?" He blinked at her. He understood nothing. He only held her hand. She lifted her free hand. She looked at it for one strange moment, as if it belonged to someone else. It was a small hand, thin, with the ink stain on the middle finger that never washed out. She thought, absurdly, of her mother saying, "Vivienne, you have a lady's hands. Do not spoil them." She made a fist. She brought it down on the ice. The ice held. Her knuckles split. Blood came up bright on the white. She hit it again. The ice cracked, a small clean line. She hit it again. Her wrist rang with the shock. She did not stop. She hit it again, and the ice broke, piece by piece. And she pushed the pieces aside with her bare, bleeding hands, and she made a path in the ice, a rough channel, from the hole where the boy was toward the shallow bank. She dragged him with her as she went. He was very heavy in his wet coat. His teeth were chattering so hard she could hear them, a small dry sound like dice in a cup. The cold got into her hands and past her hands and into her arms. Her fingers stopped feeling like fingers. They felt like sticks. The blood on her knuckles froze in small dark beads. She did not look at them. She hit the ice. She broke the ice. She pulled the boy through. She did not know how long it took. Later, when she tried to remember, she could not tell if it had been 3 minutes or 30. At last her knee touched the mud at the bottom of the shallow end. She stood up in water to her waist, and she lifted the boy out of the water and into her arms. He was so cold he was not shivering anymore, and that frightened her more than anything. She waded to the bank. She fell twice on the muddy slope. She got up both times. She carried him up the rise and across the long white lawn and toward the house, and her legs were shaking so hard she thought they would fold under her. But they did not. She was halfway up the lawn when she saw him. The Duke of Marchford was running toward her. He was in his shirt sleeves. He had come out without a coat. He had come out, she realized dimly, because someone had told him, because the housemaid had run to him, because the whole house was running now. She could see behind him, at the top of the rise, the shapes of servants, a footman with a blanket, the butler with a lantern, though it was full daylight. The Duke reached her. He did not speak. He took the boy out of her arms. He was quick and strong and gentle. He turned at once toward the house, and then he stopped, because Vivienne had not moved, and he had felt, in taking the boy from her, that her arms were shaking so much she could not lower them. He looked at her. She would remember, all her life, the way he looked at her in that moment. It was not gratitude. It was not surprise. It was something more like recognition, as if he had been looking for her face for a long time, and had finally found it. His own face was very pale. His hair was dark with sweat, though the air was freezing. His eyes were the color of wet slate. "Your hands," he said. She looked down at her hands. They were red and torn and blue at the tips. The knuckles were split open. Blood ran in slow, cold lines down her wrists and into the sleeves of her dress. She had not felt any of it. "They are all right," she said. Her voice sounded strange, far away. "Take him. He is very cold. Take him to the fire." Marchford opened his mouth to say something. He shut it. He gave her one more look, and then he turned and ran, the boy in his arms, toward the house. Vivienne stood alone on the white lawn for a long moment. The world was very quiet. The frost sparkled. A crow called somewhere. She looked at her hands, and she thought, in a small, clear voice inside her own head, "I broke the ice with these." Then her knees gave out. She did not fall to the ground. A pair of arms caught her under her elbows. It was the butler, panting, his lantern discarded in the grass. "Miss," he said. "Miss, come now, come now, come." And he half carried her toward the house. They put her by the kitchen fire because it was closest. Cook wrapped her in a blanket and stripped off her wet shoes and stockings and rubbed her feet with a rough cloth. A maid brought hot bricks in wool and set them at her sides. Another maid brought a basin of warm water and salt for her hands. Vivienne let them do all of it. She could not have stopped them if she had wanted to. She was shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Above her, somewhere in the house, she heard footsteps running up the stairs. She heard the Duke's voice, low and urgent, calling for the doctor, calling for hot water, calling for the fire to be built up in the boy's room. She closed her eyes. The warmth crept into her by inches. Her hands, in the salt water, began to burn, and she was glad of the burning. It meant they were still there. The doctor came within the hour. He was a small, tidy man with a bald head and quick, kind hands. He went first to the boy. He was upstairs for a long time. When he came down, he came to Vivienne in the kitchen. "The child will live," he said, before she could ask. "He is warm. He is breathing well. He is asleep. He will have a fever, likely, in the night. But he will live." Vivienne closed her eyes. She did not cry. She simply let out a breath she had been holding since the pond. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me," the doctor said. "You did the thing that mattered. Now show me your hands." He looked at her hands. He looked at her hands. He cleaned them. He picked small pieces of ice and reed and blood from between her fingers. He put a soft brown salve on her knuckles. He wrapped each hand in clean linen. He said she had cracked the skin badly, but he did not think she had broken bones. He said her fingers would be stiff for a fortnight. He said she must not use them for anything that could be avoided. He said she was very lucky. He said the boy was very lucky. He said she was, in his professional opinion, either a brave woman or a foolish one, and possibly both. She smiled a little, for the first time since morning. "Both," she said. He nodded. He packed his bag. He went out. Cook and the maids helped her upstairs. They put her into her own small bed, in her own small room at the back of the house, and they piled every blanket they could find on top of her. They set a warming pan at her feet. They built the fire so high it roared. One of the maids sat by her for a long time, holding a cup of broth to her lips because she could not hold it herself. At some point in the afternoon, Vivienne slept. She woke in the early evening. The room was dim. A single candle burned on the mantel. The fire was low. Her hands throbbed in their linen bandages. Her whole body ached in a slow, deep way, as if she had been beaten. But she was warm. She was in a bed. She was alive. She turned her head. The Duke of Marchford was sitting in the chair by her fire. She had not heard him come in. She did not know how long he had been there. He was very still. His elbows rested on his knees. His hands were folded. He was looking at the fire, not at her. He had changed his clothes. He had washed. His dark hair was still damp at the ends. His face, in the low light, looked older than she had thought it looked. She lay very still and watched him for a moment. She thought calmly that she should say something. She did not know what. He turned his head then, as if he had felt her eyes, and he saw that she was awake. He did not smile. He did not stand up. He said quietly, "Miss Ashcombe." "Your Grace," she said. Her voice was rough. He rose then, slowly, and he came to the side of the bed. He did not sit on it. He stood beside it, and he looked down at her, and his face did something she could not read. "He is asleep," he said. "The fever has come. It is not high. The doctor says he will do." "I am glad," she said. There was a long silence. The fire ticked. Somewhere in the house a door closed. "You went into the water," he said. "Yes." "You broke the ice with your hands." "Yes." He looked away from her. He looked away from her. He looked at the wall above her head. She saw the muscle in his jaw move. "Why?" he said. She had not expected the question. She thought about it for a moment. She was very tired, and her mind moved slowly. "Because he was in it," she said. "And I was near." Marchford closed his eyes. It was only for a second. When he opened them, they were bright. "There were 3 men closer than you," he said. "The gardener was in the lower field. 2 grooms were at the near stable. They all heard the housemaid at the same moment. You were in the hall. You were farther than any of them, and you got there first." Vivienne did not know what to say to that. It had not occurred to her that there had been anyone else. "I do not run well," she said. "As a rule." It must have been the day for it. He almost laughed. It was a small, broken sound, hardly a laugh at all. He passed a hand over his face. "Miss Ashcombe," he said, "I have been Duke of Marchford for 11 years. I have had, in that time, many things done for me. Things done for my name, for my money, for my favor. I have grown, I think, unable to tell the difference between a service and a transaction." He paused. His voice was very low. "You did not know I would see. You did not run because I was watching. There was no one to see, and no one to thank you. You did it because a child was in the water." "Yes," she said. He looked at her hands, folded on the coverlet in their white bandages. He did not touch them. He looked at them for a long time. "I will not forget it," he said. Then he bowed to her, a small, formal bow, and he went out of the room, and he shut the door quietly behind him. Vivienne lay in the dim light for a long time after he had gone. Her hands throbbed. Her chest felt very full. She did not weep. She was not a woman who wept easily. But she lay there and looked at the ceiling, and she thought about the way he had said her name, as if he had been practicing it in his mouth for hours before he came in. She slept again. In the morning, the boy was better. His fever had broken in the night. He was pale and weak, but he was awake, and he asked for her before he asked for anything else. Cook brought Vivienne this news with the breakfast tray, and Cook's eyes were pink at the edges, and Cook said, gruffly, that the child was a rascal and would not be allowed near the pond again if she had anything to say about it, which she did. Vivienne could not use her hands well. She could not hold a spoon. Cook fed her broth from a cup. She was mortified by it and grateful for it in equal measure. By noon she could sit up. By afternoon she could walk, slowly, and with a wobble. By evening she insisted on being taken to the nursery. Theo was propped up on pillows, small and thin under the blankets, his grey eyes enormous in his white face. When he saw her come in, he did not speak. He only put out one small hand toward her. Vivienne could not take it. Her own hands were still wrapped. She sat down on the edge of the bed instead, and she leaned her forehead against his forehead, gently for a moment, and she said, "Hello, Theo." "Hello, Miss Ashcombe," he whispered. She sat with him until he slept. She hummed a tune her mother had hummed to her when she was small. She did not sing the words. She did not need to. The days that followed were strange. The whole house had heard, of course. It was the sort of story that could not be kept quiet, and the servants told it and retold it in the kitchen, and the version they told was, if anything, larger than the truth. In the servants' version, Vivienne had walked across the whole pond on ice thinner than a page. In the servants' version, she had lifted the boy above her head like a hero out of an old story. In the servants' version, the Duke had wept openly when she brought the child up the lawn. None of this was quite what had happened. But something had happened. Even Vivienne, careful and quiet as she was, could feel it in the house. The Duke no longer went to the library at 8:30. He came to the small east parlour. The first morning he did it, Vivienne almost dropped her cup. She had not been sure her hands would hold it, and she had been very proud when they did. And then his footstep had come down the hall and had not gone past the door. It had stopped. He had knocked. He had come in. He did not sit at first. He stood by the fire. He asked how she did. She said she did well enough. He nodded. He looked at her hands, wrapped still in fresh linen. He said the doctor had told him she would recover full use in a fortnight. "Yes," she said. "May I sit?" he said. She was so surprised she only nodded. He sat in the chair opposite hers. He did not speak for a while. Neither did she. The fire crackled. Outside the window, the frost was giving at last, and drops of water fell from the edge of the roof in slow, sudden lines. At last he said, "Theo asked me to read to him this morning." Vivienne looked up. "He has not asked me anything," Marchford said, "since he came here. He has answered when I have spoken. He has not asked. This morning he asked me to read to him from the book that you bring." "The poems," she said. "Yes. He said the horse's name is Bramble." Vivienne smiled. She could not help it. "He wanted me to know," Marchford said. "That was all. He wanted me to know that the horse has a name." There was a small silence. "You have done for that child," he said. "In 3 months, what I have not been able to do in a year." "I read to him," Vivienne said. Vivienne said, "That is not much." "It is a great deal," Marchford said. "I only wished you to know that I know it." He rose then. He looked as if he might say more. He did not. He bowed. He went out. He came again the next morning. And the next. He did not stay long. He came, he sat, he asked 1 or 2 quiet questions, he went. Vivienne, whose life for years had been arranged to make no ripples in any water, found herself moving her hair before she came down each morning, and she was cross with herself for it, and she did it anyway. Lady Osprey noticed. Of course she did. Lady Osprey had been noticing everything in that house for 80 years, and there was very little that got past her. "He has stopped going to the library at 8, said Lady Osprey one afternoon, without looking up from her embroidery, which she never actually did but which she liked to have in her lap. "He goes at 9 now," Vivienne said carefully. "He goes to the east parlour at 8, said Lady Osprey. "Where you sit." "Where he comes for a short time only, ma'am." "He has never come to any parlour," said Lady Osprey. She set down her embroidery. She looked at Vivienne with sharp, bright eyes. "My dear, I am an old woman, and I do not have time for delicacy. My nephew has been a stone for 11 years. He was a boy once. He was a bright boy. His father was a hard man, and his mother was frightened of her own shadow. And then he had a younger brother he loved past reason, and that brother married a good girl, and they had Theo. And then the brother died of a fever, and the girl died a year later of grief, more or less, and Alastair took the child and closed himself up in this house. He is not a stone by nature. He was made into one. And you have chipped him, my dear. You have chipped him quite badly." Vivienne looked at her folded hands. The bandages were smaller now. She could bend her fingers, though it still hurt. "I did not mean to chip anything, ma'am." "Oh, I know," said Lady Osprey. "That is why it worked. There was, of course, a villain. There is always a villain, in stories and in life, and this house had one, though Vivienne had not thought of her that way. Her name was Lady Fenmore. She was Marchford's cousin, on his mother's side. She was a widow, and she was not old, and she had been trying, in a quiet way that everyone understood but no one named, to be the next Duchess of Marchford for the better part of 8 years. She came down from London 3 times a year and stayed for a fortnight and made herself at home. She was very handsome. She was very well dressed. She had a very sweet voice, and she used it the way a card sharp uses a deck. She arrived at Ashwick a week after the pond. She had heard, of course, before she came. Everyone had heard. The story had travelled to London by the second day. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon in a green carriage, with 2 maids and a small dog on a ribbon, and she swept into the front hall as if she had been born in it, which in a way she had been. Vivienne saw her from the top of the stair. She was on her way down to the parlour. She heard the voice first, that pretty voice, and she paused on the landing. "Alastair, my dear, my dear." Lady Fenmore was saying, "I came the moment I heard. Where is the poor little creature? Where is the brave companion? I must see them at once. I positively must." Vivienne came down the rest of the way, slowly. She met Lady Fenmore at the foot of the stair. Lady Fenmore looked her up and down. Her eyes were very quick and very cold, though her mouth stayed sweet. "So this," she said, "is our little heroine." "Lady Fenmore," Vivienne said, and curtsied as best she could. "How your hands must have hurt," said Lady Fenmore, with a small, sad tilt of her head. "How brave. How brave. How very brave. Cousin, we must have her sit down. She looks very tired." "Miss Ashcombe is quite well," said Marchford, who was standing behind his cousin, and whose voice was flatter than usual. Of course," said Lady Fenmore. "Only, you know, one wants to be kind." She was kind, for 2 days. She was so kind it made Vivienne's teeth ache. She sat by Vivienne at dinner and asked her about her family, and where she had come from, and what her circumstances were, and whether it was true that her father had died in some sad affair to do with the sea, and whether it was true her mother had been the daughter of a country parson, and whether she had ever seen London, poor thing, and whether she found country life dull, and whether she thought she might like to travel some day if her circumstances allowed, dear Miss Ashcombe. Vivienne answered each question as briefly as courtesy allowed. She had grown up with her mother's rule: never lie, never explain more than you must, never let the sweetness of a voice fool you about the sharpness of the tongue. On the third day, at dinner, Lady Fenmore sprang her trap. They were at table. There was Marchford at the head, Lady Osprey to his right in her chair with wheels, Lady Fenmore to his left. Vivienne was farther down, in her usual place. There were candles. The room smelled of roasted meat and rosemary and the beeswax of the candles. The fire in the great hearth crackled and popped. A servant moved behind them, quiet as a shadow, filling glasses. Lady Fenmore lifted her wine and turned her sweet face toward Vivienne. "Miss Ashcombe," she said, "I have been thinking a great deal about your remarkable adventure. And I have been thinking, too, about what a debt this family owes you." "There is no debt, my lady," Vivienne said. "Oh, but there is," Lady Fenmore said, "and I have been wondering how it might be paid. It is not simple, is it, to reward such a thing? One cannot put a price on a child's life. And yet, one wants to give something. One wants to be sure that the person who did such a thing is provided for." She paused. Her eyes were very bright. "I have been asking myself," she said, "what a woman in Miss Ashcombe's position might most want. A little cottage, perhaps. A small annual sum. Enough to live quietly. Enough that she need not, remain in a position of service. So that no one might, however unfairly, suggest that she had done what she did for the sake of advantage." The room went very, very quiet. Vivienne felt every eye in the room. She felt the servant behind her stop moving. She felt Lady Osprey's hand go still on her spoon. She felt Marchford, at the head of the table, freeze in his chair. She looked at Lady Fenmore. She did not blush. She did not raise her voice. She set down her own glass very carefully. She folded her bandaged hands in her lap. "Lady Fenmore," she said quietly, "I have not asked for anything. I do not intend to ask for anything. If the family wishes to make me a gift, that is their own matter, and I will accept what is offered with thanks, as any woman must. But I did not go into the pond for a cottage. I went into it because a child was drowning. If there is any advantage in that, my lady, I am not clever enough to see it." She did not lift her eyes. She lifted the glass again. She drank a small sip of water. She set it down. The silence held. Lady Osprey, from her chair, made a small sound that was almost a laugh, and turned it, halfway out, into a cough. Marchford said, very evenly, "Cousin, you will apologize to Miss Ashcombe. Now." Lady Fenmore's mouth opened. Her cheeks coloured. "My dear Alastair," she said, "I meant only—" "Now," he said. She looked at him. Whatever she saw in his face was not what she had expected to see. Her chin trembled once. Then she smoothed her expression, and she turned her sweet face toward Vivienne, and she said, in a voice as light as a bell, "Miss Ashcombe, I am afraid I have expressed myself very poorly. I did not mean to suggest any such thing. Please forgive me." "There is nothing to forgive, my lady." "My lady," Vivienne said. Dinner went on. Nobody said very much. Lady Fenmore left the next morning, with her carriage and her maids and her small dog on a ribbon, and she did not come again for a long time, and when she did, she was very quiet. That night, after dinner, Marchford did not go to his study. Vivienne was in the small parlour. She had gone there to be alone. Her hands hurt. Her chest hurt in a different way. She had been very calm at dinner. She was not calm now. She sat by the fire with her hands folded in her lap, and she stared at the flames, and she felt, at last, the tears she had not wept in the boy's room, in her own bed, on the lawn. They came now, hot and slow and silent. She did not sob. She only let them come. She heard his footstep in the hall. She wiped her face at once with the back of her wrist. She sat straighter. The door opened. He came in. He saw her at once. He did not pretend not to see. He came to the fire. He sat, not opposite her this time, but on the low bench beside the hearth, close enough that if she reached out her foot, she would have touched his. He did not speak. She did not speak. The fire cracked. Outside the window, an owl called, once, and then again. A log fell in the grate and sent up a small shower of sparks that died before they reached the stone. The candles on the mantel guttered and steadied. The whole world, for a long moment, was that small warm room with two people in it who did not speak. She saw, in the low light, that his hands were folded tight on his knees. His knuckles were white. She saw that he was angrier than he had let himself show at dinner, and that he was trying not to show it now. At last he said, "She should not have said what she said." "No." Vivienne said, "She should not have." But she did. "And it is not the first time such a thing has been said to me in my life, Your Grace. It will not be the last." He turned his head then. He looked at her. "It will," he said. "But the last time such a thing is said to you in this house." She could not answer that. She looked down at her hands. The bandages were smaller now. Pink new skin showed at the edges. She would carry the scars for a long time. The doctor had told her so. "Miss Ashcombe," he said, and stopped. He tried again. "Vivienne." She looked up. She had not heard him say her given name. Nobody in this house had said her given name. She was startled by the softness of it in his mouth. "I have been," he said. "For a long time, a man who has believed that people do things for reasons that are not the reasons they name. I have believed it because it has, most often, been true. I have paid, and I have paid well, and I have watched the paying buy me a kind of loneliness I could not have imagined when I was young." He paused. His voice was very low. "I do not think you did what you did to be paid. I do not think you have done any single thing in this house to be paid. I think you are a woman who does the thing that must be done, because it must be done, and it does not occur to you to wonder afterward who is looking." She sat very still. "I have been looking, though," he said. "For some months now. I did not know I was looking until the day of the pond. I could pretend, and I have been pretending, that I did not know until then. But I did know. I have known since the morning I passed the east parlour door and heard you laugh, once, at something the maid said in the hall. I stopped in the corridor. I did not go in. I went on to the library. But I stopped." He looked at her steadily. "You did not know that. I never told you. I am telling you now, so that you know." Vivienne felt the tears come up again. She let them. She did not try to stop them, and she did not try to hide them. He saw them. He did not look away. "I do not," she said, when she could speak, "wish for a cottage, Your Grace, nor an annual sum, nor to be provided for. "I know," he said. "I do not know what I wish for," she said. "I have not let myself wish for anything for a great many years. I do not know how to begin." He was quiet a moment. Then he said, very gently, "May I sit with you a little longer? That is all I am asking tonight." She nodded. She could not speak. They sat by the fire. The clock ticked. The owl called again. Somewhere upstairs, in the nursery, a small boy slept and did not dream of ice. At some point, without meaning to, Vivienne unfolded her hands from her lap. She laid them, palms up, on the arm of the chair. The bandages were pale in the firelight. Her fingers were curled a little, the way they curled now when she was tired. She did not know why she did it. It was not an offer. It was only a small, unguarded thing. Marchford looked at her hands for a long moment. He did not take them. He knew better than that. He reached out, very slowly, and he laid the tip of one finger, only one, against the back of her wrist, above the bandage, where the skin was whole. He left it there. She did not move. She did not breathe for a small moment. Then she breathed. She let herself. The finger stayed. His hand did not move. Her hand did not move. That was all, that night. It was enough. The weeks that followed came and went slowly. The frost gave. The pond thawed. The gardener drained the lower field and mended the fence and put up a low wooden rail across the narrow neck of the pond so that a small boy walking there in a fog would come to the rail and stop. Marchford himself walked out one afternoon and inspected the rail and paid the gardener with his own hand and said something to him quietly that the gardener did not report. And the gardener went home and told his wife his master was not the man he had been in November. The bandages came off Vivienne's hands. The scars stayed. She had thin white lines across her knuckles and one deeper mark on the base of her right thumb, where the ice had cut deepest. She could hold a cup. She could hold a book. She could hold a pen. She could, in time, hold a small boy's hand when he offered it, which he did now, every day, without being asked. Marchford came to the east parlour every morning at 8. He no longer knocked. He came in, sat, and stayed a quarter of an hour. Sometimes they spoke of the estate. Sometimes they spoke of the child. Sometimes they read, each with a book, and they did not speak at all, and that was the best kind of morning. One day in March, when the crocuses were up in the south border, Cook came to Vivienne with a strange look on her face. "Miss," she said, "I have a thing to tell you that I ought not to tell, and I am going to tell it anyway, because it will do you good, and I do not care if it is proper." "Then tell me," Vivienne said, and set down her mending. "You know the smith's daughter, Nell, down in the village?" "Down in the village. I know her a little. She was to lose her cottage this month, miss. Her father died in the winter, and the rent was in arrears, and the man who owns the land was going to put her out. She has 3 little ones. I did not know. Nobody knew, miss. Nell is proud. She did not speak of it. Well," Cook lowered her voice, "the rent has been paid. All of it, and a year more besides. And a note went round to the man who owns the land that says the cottage is now Nell's outright, given as a gift. From a friend." Vivienne set the mending down properly. "From whom?" "From whom?" "The note was not signed, miss. But the coachman was told to drive out and deliver it, and the coachman told the second footman, and the second footman told me, and it was his grace. He asked, before he sent it, whether Nell had children still living, because there had been talk of a little one lost in the autumn. He wanted to be sure of the number. He did not want it known. Vivienne said, slowly. He did not want it known, miss. He was very sharp with the coachman about not speaking of it. The coachman would not have spoken, but he told the second footman, and the second footman told me because the coachman said something about the way His Grace had asked the question. About the children. Vivienne looked out the window. The crocuses were purple in the border. A blackbird sat on the low wall and turned its yellow eye. She thought of Nell, whom she had spoken to twice in her life, and of Nell's 3 children, whom she had never met. "Cook," she said. "Thank you for telling me." "Oh, I thought you ought to know, miss," said Cook. "That is all. That is all." Vivienne did not speak to him about it. She did not thank him. She never mentioned it. But the next morning, when he came into the parlour and sat in his chair and asked whether she was warm enough, she looked at him for a long moment before she answered, and he looked back. And something in his face changed, though he did not know why, and something in her chest opened a little wider than it had been before. Spring came. The gardens bloomed. Theo grew taller and less quiet. He rode a small pony that the gardener led. He learned to name 3 kinds of birds. He asked, one evening at supper, whether Miss Ashcombe might come and hear him read a page, and Marchford said, without looking up from his plate, "I imagine Miss Ashcombe would like that very much." It was on a warm evening in early May that the last thing happened. They had been walking, the 3 of them, in the long garden after supper. Theo had run ahead, chasing a butterfly he could not catch. Marchford and Vivienne walked side by side on the gravel path. The air smelled of hawthorn and cut grass and the small sweet lilacs by the wall. Somewhere a bee was working. Somewhere a wood pigeon called. The sky was pale and gold at the edges, and the shadows of the yew trees were long across the lawn. Marchford stopped. Vivienne stopped too. He turned to her. He did not take her hands. He looked at them, first, in the low golden light, at the thin white marks across her knuckles that would not go away. Then he looked up at her face. "Miss Ashcombe," he said, "I have thought for some time about what I might say to you when I said it. I have made a great many drafts, in my head, most of which were not honest, and 1 or 2 of which were not kind. I am going to speak plainly, because plain speech is what you deserve, and it is what I have learned from you." She waited. "I have loved you," he said, "for since the morning you carried my nephew up the lawn, though I did not know it that morning, and I did not admit it for a long time after. It grew in me between one day and the next, and it grew without my permission, and I am glad of it now. I do not know what I have to offer you that would be enough. My name is not enough. My house is not enough. What I have is a life that has been very quiet for a very long time, and one small boy who loves you more than he loves me, and a great many mornings in a small parlour, and, if you will have it, all of the ones that come after." Vivienne could not speak for a moment. She looked at him. She looked at the man who had come out of his house without a coat, who had taken a child from her arms with such gentleness that she still remembered the weight of the absence when he had gone. She looked at the man who had paid a widow's rent in secret and had been sharp with a coachman for speaking of it. She looked at the man who had come, morning after morning, to sit with her by a fire and not require anything of her, and who had laid one finger, only one, on the back of her wrist, and left it there. She looked at her hands. The scars were faint now in the golden light. She thought of the ice, and how it had felt under her fist, and how, when the second blow had landed, she had not thought of anything at all except the child. She lifted one of her hands. She lifted it slowly. She held it out to him, palm up, the way she had left it on the arm of the chair that night in the parlour. He took it, this time. very carefully. He turned it over in his own. He bent his head and pressed his lips to the small white scar at the base of her thumb. Somewhere down the path, Theo shouted about the butterfly. Yes, Vivienne said quietly, to no one at all, and to him, and to the garden, and to the pale gold sky. Yes, Alistair, I will have all of it. They walked on, slowly, along the gravel path in the warm May evening, and the boy ran back to them and put his hand in Vivienne's other hand, and none of them spoke for a while, and the wood-pigeon called, and the last of the light lay on the grass like something set down gently by a careful hand. Some houses are woken by grand events, and some are woken by small ones. Ashwick had been woken by a woman with bare hands and a child with a cold mouth, and its long silence was over at last.